everyone. Welcome to Behind the Couch. I'm Dr. Shiloh. It's October 23rd. It's a week before Halloween. And I'm here with
Dr. Scott.
What's up, Dr. Scott?
Halloween. I'm excited. You were in different places again. You were at home in your lovely backyard Southern California pool. I'm going to do a quick. I'm in Palm Springs.
Oh, it's so blue there.
It's
gorgeous.
Completely clear. I'm looking out. If you can't see behind this tree, that's the Elvis Hollywood Hideaway home.
I know. Renovating. Oh, they are renovating it.
Yeah.
It is a beautiful fall day here. I think we got a little magic fall weather from our friend Rebecca Sebastian, who is in the house. Literally, she's on the other side of that wall staying with me this weekend. And we have some nice overcast, fun fall weather. We went and walked around the little Halloween street fair this afternoon. And I bought some pumpkin bagels. And Rebecca said she won't let me out of the room. She's in my basement. Just kidding. So it's a nice fall day. I just made some pumpkin oatmeal cookies. Had a little hocus pocus on earlier. We're trying to pretend like we have seasons here.
Yeah, exactly. Pretend it's not earthquake season.
Oh, I know. We had the great shakeout the other day. Did they make an announcement? Were you off? It was Thursday.
I was off, which is good. But they're doing this thing now where the city is the city was like sending out email after email after email, because if they come and inspect your desk area and there's not enough space for you to be under your desk.
Oh, like you have a bunch of crap under there?
Yeah, then you can be fined like up to $10,000. So they were really pushing us to
Lord.
Clean out under our desk. Yeah.
I don't know if I could fit my ass under my desk.
I want that desk set up like Jason Alexander had in Seinfeld. That's like with a little hammock, not a little hammock, but like the sleeping area.
Oh my God.
I'd love that.
Emily says we've had 3 seasons this week alone. That's how we have season when it gets to fall in California. We have all 4 seasons in a 24-hour period. So it's winter in the morning. It's very cold. And then it gets a little fall-like, and then summer, and that tapers off like spring and starts all over in one day.
And then hits you, but we have fake fall like 4 times.
Oh yeah.
It's cooling off. It's great. And then you have like 3 days of unbelievable, dry, horrible, like you wake up in the middle of the night just clutching your throat because you're so dehydrated.
Yeah.
But anyway, we pretend it's fall. We pretend it's like.
Well, tomorrow should be nice. We're going out to Heritage Square, which is this area in Los Angeles where they have preserved and moved all of these old homes, mostly Victorians, to this one little park area in Los Angeles. And we were invited by the Heritage Square Museum to go. They're having a cult event, which hence the reason why Rebecca Sebastian made the trip out. She could not miss it. But we've been before. It's actually what inspired our vintage Los Angeles episode that we did a few years ago, because you go and they sort of reenact these famous LA true crime events. And so this one's going to be cult themed. So follow us on social media. We'll post from there for sure. It'll be a good time.
And just for those of you that in our cult episode a couple of years ago, we did touch on the fact that Los Angeles has an extraordinarily high number of cults that have come and gone in the last 100 years of various kinds, like health crazed oriented ones, sex oriented ones, religion oriented ones. So it's just been this cornucopia of crazy.
A cornucopia of cults. Say that 3 times fast.
Cornucopia of crazy cults. Cornucopia of crazy cults.
Oh my gosh.
So this week's episode was the paranormal. This is kind of something that I always love to dip my toe into. I think I'm maybe bringing you into my folie à deux, my madness. So because
I think you are.
You're getting a little more flexible about it, right?
I am, especially. Thank you so much for suggesting Surviving Death on Netflix, because what I fully appreciate about it, and I wish I had watched all of it actually before we did our episode, I kind of regret that I lacked in that area of research, but I appreciate the institutions at these universities that they go to and the researchers that they talk to, and how they are really setting up very good control studies.
Yeah.
It can't be, not everything can be replicated in a perfect RCT, randomized controlled study or controlled test. But they do the best that they absolutely can scientifically. And I just think it's interesting that some have been around forever. We talked about some that don't exist anymore in our episode, at really big universities and prestigious colleges. So I love that part about it, that they're going in and talking to the researchers and the scientists and the psychologists that are looking at this stuff. And so that helps me buy into it a bit more. Like I said in the episode, we don't necessarily have more answers, but at least it's being documented, it's being recorded in a very academic, scientific way. And I'm all for that, because that's going to be the background that if this breaks through one day to something we do discover and the science does catch up, that's going to be great to have.
Absolutely.
So I thought we would, I hope many of you got to watch the show, but we're going to kind of go through episode by episode in terms of, because each episode is a different topic, and they're pretty much the topics that we covered, and just kind of have a little discussion, maybe where we fall as far as believing this stuff, and then open it up to anyone that's had any experiences, stories you'd like to share in this realm. We just thought it would be fun to hear. I think there's some things, like some experiences that I probably previously have not shared. Not that I have as many stories as you do, Scott, but there are some that I was kind of remembering as I was watching this series. But the first episode, which I thought was the most fascinating for me, is near-death experiences. It starts off with this woman who is a spinal surgeon. She's the woman that was kayaking. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
So she is in a kayaking accident where she gets trapped for 30 minutes. I mean, her brain is without oxygen for 30 minutes. I mean, 30 seconds to a minute could be very devastating. Our nurses can, jump in here in the chat with information about that. But she was trapped upside down in her kayak to where they basically called off the search, except for one guy was, Kelly, it's you, I'm calling you out. One guy went to go recover her vest or her life vest or something, because he thought, well, maybe her husband wants to have this because we know she's gone. And as he's swimming to go get it, he bumps into her body. So they knew that's where she was, and they pull her out. They, try and resuscitate her, and she is purple and blue and has fixed eyes and is dead. And they end up being able to resuscitate her. And even though it was a long recovery, she had a lot of broken bones and torn muscles. She fully recovers, fully. She is not stumbling on words. She's back to her job as a surgeon. And she talks about the afterlife, which at first, okay, here's me being super skeptical, just like everyone else does, the light, the flowery fields, some beings to welcome her that she called beings, I think. She's like, but I knew they were ancestors. And, all just kind of the checkbox of what everyone pretty much says. But then she says, as a doctor, as a person of science, I tried everything to explain this away. But the twist is that she says there's something that the beings told me about my son that I really wanted to explain it away for this reason. That's because they told her son would die young.
Oof, I forgot.
So, yeah. So then, she's like, until his 18th birthday, she's waking up every day. Is this the day my child is going to die? And she had 4 children. He was the oldest. They specifically named him. And I think on his 18th birthday, she shared with him, what that experience was. And she's like, he took it like a champ. Like he wasn't freaked out by it. And then they start showing pictures where he's like this downhill skier. And I'm like, oh God, this is not going to end well. Don't get your son into downhill skiing if you have a premonition that he's going to die. But yeah, I mean, also that fact of like he had to also live his life too, I thought was interesting. But he ends up going on a ski trip when he's like 22 years old. And I think he and a friend were walking along a road and a car hit him and killed him. It came true when he was 22. That was hard, very hard to explain. But NDEs are super, super fascinating.
Yeah,
what do you think about them, Scott?
I don't. It's very interesting. I can take two perspectives. I had an experience when I was 5. I was at a neighbor's house who had a pool in our neighborhood. The teenage girls that were around my older brother's age were supposed to be taking care of me, and they weren't watching me at all. And my brother kind of happens to show up at this certain time and goes, "Where's Scott?" And they look around, they can't find me. And they realize I'm at the bottom of the pool, like completely motionless. And, I have a very strange memory. I would like remember what I was doing was jumping off the side of the pool in the shallow end and then walking out and then jumping. And I got in just too deep one time, or I jumped too far. And I remember splashing, trying to get to the edge. And I was fighting the water and then taking big gulps of it. And then I remember like everything just stopping.
Yeah.
And getting really relaxing, and then just feeling myself floating and sort of floating down away from myself. And then the next thing I remembered was like coughing and looking up into my brother's face as he was crying because they were getting me to the hospital. He had some very weird coincidental things about this, is that he walked up just at the time that I had like really come out. He had just learned CPR the day before in high school. He had just learned the day before and was able to resuscitate me. Wow. And so I didn't have like, meeting anybody but I remember light, and I remember a feeling of peace and floating. And now what I do know from the science of it is that when your brain is deprived of oxygen, there's a lot of our own natural hallucinogens get released into our brain. They're called DMTs. They're the same chemicals that you get exposed to like when you use mushrooms or other mild hallucinogens, but you get a lot of them when your body decides to dump them on you. So I didn't have anything I've had other weird paranormal-ish type stuff happen in my life. That wasn't one, except for the synchronicity of it. I mean, just the weird synchronicity of it. And so that was my closest like near death thing.
That's what Kelly's saying in the chat. Like there's a reason that he learned CPR that day.
A lot of people get kind of pissy about there's a reason. I just think that I don't know what all is out there beyond us, and I have like my spiritual and religious beliefs have evolved substantially from when I was very young, to a point of I have great humility and knowing that I have none of the answers. And maybe that's why I'm here, is that we're supposed to try and find out, and we're supposed to be okay with not knowing everything, and yet still seek. Sure. And still be kind and compassionate and stop judging each other. And I love that The Good Place, the series, is that, one of the questions that the main character asks when she first realizes she's dead, she's like, well, who got it right? And he was like, basically, he said that the angel said, or Michael says, like, everybody got about 5% right, which 5% is not very much at all.
No. Not at all. Hence the reason she knows she's definitely in the wrong place.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I was interested in, is the brain science with NDEs. And they go through and do brain scans and do some brain imagery on the folks that have had these experiences to see if there's different, parts that are functioning or not functioning or on overdrive or crisscrossed wires. And there really wasn't anything. But But I don't know. There was some freaky stuff and kind of premonitions mixed in. There was the woman who was pregnant and she kept having premonitions that she was going to die in birth. And, that her son was going to be fine when he was born. And she was married to this, I don't know if he was like a pilot and an engineer and, very scientific guy that just was not having it. And she had even told her OBGYN about it. And she's like, hey, it's my job to calm people down when they're anxious about giving birth. And then in the operating room, when they're doing the C-section, because she started hemorrhaging and had to go into emergency surgery, the doctor like steps back and kind of like looks up and goes, I can't believe this is happening. Like, she called it. And the woman, after she lived, but she remembers being up above her body when this is happening and exactly recalling that the doctor said those things and recalled it back to her. And so the doctor's like, after that, like, I didn't even know what to say. I just know that I have to take this experience as it is and question some things a little bit more. So
have you ever seen the posting that says, when you die, you really want a physicist to speak at your funeral?
No, I haven't seen that.
It's a really beautiful thing about what happens. And I'll say that, or I'll post it. It's by Aaron Freeman, which is really, it's really beautiful. It's a physicist who writes. But for those of you that saw, anybody that is into horror, there's a Netflix series written and directed by Mike Flanagan, who did the Haunting of Hill House adaptation. This is called Midnight Mass. And it's a really great philosophical horror miniseries. I really loved it. And there's a lot of talking. Like, he gets very talky characters. And there's a great meeting between two former childhood sweethearts. And one is a practicing Catholic and one is a lapsed Catholic. And they're having this discussion of like, well, what do you think happens after you die? And she gives like a really beautiful sort of a really poetic version of what we kind of all expect. And then she says, what about you? And he's just come out of 5 years in prison for killing a young woman in a car accident when he was under the influence of drugs. And he went on a major religious journey looking at all faiths. And, he said, I finally found that I don't really believe any of them, but, there's wisdom in all of them. But then he says, this is paraphrased, but I want to read this. She asked him, like, well, what happens when you die? And he said, when I die, my body stops functioning. 5 minutes later, my brain cells start dying. But in the meantime, in between, maybe my brain releases a flood of DMT, the psychedelic drug released when we dream. So I dream. I dream bigger than I've ever dreamed before because it's all of it. Just the last dump of DMT all at once, and my neurons are firing. And I'm seeing this firework display of memories and imagination. My mind's rifling through the memories, long-term, short-term, and the dreams mixed with the memories. And it's a curtain call. One last great dream as my mind empties the fucking missile silos, and then I stop. My brain activity ceases and there's nothing left of me. No pain, no memory, no awareness that I ever was, that I ever hurt someone, that I ever killed someone. Boy, wasn't expecting to. Everything is as it was before me. All of the other little things that make me up, the microbes and the bacterium, and the billion other little things that live on in my eyelashes and in my hair and in my mouth and on my skin and in my gut and everywhere else. They just keep on living and eating. And I'm serving a purpose. I'm feeding life. And I'm broken apart. And all the littlest pieces of me are recycled. And I'm billions of other places. Sorry, folks.
Whoa. No, don't apologize.
And my atoms are in plants and bugs and animals. And I'm like the stars that are in the sky. There one moment and then just scattered across the goddamn cosmos.
I love it.
Isn't that beautiful? I'm sorry, I was not expecting to get teary about that.
It's stunningly beautiful, but also you don't expect such a scientific explanation to be beautiful.
Yeah.
That's why I love it.
And have a sense of purpose about it.
Yes. Yeah, we don't get that really colorful picture when people say, nope, nothing happens when you die. Like you're just dead. That is, I can hang my hat on that. That's for sure. So that's from Midnight Mass, right?
Yeah.
Because someone's asking where that quote was from. Yeah.
And I just put it in
there
the
you
chat
go.
if anybody wants to copy it.
It's in the chat, everyone. Tracy said, I read about an OR nurse who placed a playing card on top of a tall cabinet face up. She asked her patients who had basically said they had NDEs and none of them had seen the card.
And that experiment still continues.
Does
in
it?
the research, yes, in the research hospitals that are doing this kind of work, they do. They have signs that are placed on the top. But actually, even taking it a couple of steps further, than like the first few times people tried to do this, they put writing up there, and then someone said, that might be problematic if we're talking about non-local consciousness, like consciousness leaving the body, because certain areas of the brain don't read. Like, I don't know if people know this, but you can't read when you're dreaming because that part of the brain is inactive.
Right.
So if
like
there's
symbols, pictures.
Exactly. Yeah. So they have pictures like, and, poster board put way up high that you could only see if you were above the bed. So that's fantastic.
Yeah. Anyone care to jump on with the NDE story? I'm guessing this would be the rarest. Besides what you're putting in the chats already, which is fascinating and so interesting. Rebecca says, what does not seeing the card prove or not prove?
Yes.
I know I would, if let's say I'm floating above a bed that I'm essentially dying on, I'd probably be focused on those doctors' hands and like, all right, guys, cheering you on. I'm laser focused on you.
I would be going, oh man, I should have put some gel in my hair. Oh God.
Should have changed my underwear. No,
should have changed my underwear.
Probably don't have underwear on if they're doing surgery on it. Tape the card to their forehead. Right. Love it. Yeah, there you go. So the next thing that they go into on surviving death, actually they dedicate 2 episodes to mediums. I thought it was very interesting, and probably with the highest skepticism, because we're talking about adults who are, essentially letting others believe that they have these gifts. The thing I can't get behind is the ectoplasm. I know we talked about it in our episode. In the olden days, when there was a lot of trickery going on with the photography, seems like that's where they were able to capture some imagery of it. And then now they showed, some modern physical mediums that have spirits talk through them. And because of the lighting, and they don't let cameras in, and the person's behind a curtain. They're in modern times, we're just not able to capture it. What? Like,
I don't understand why those things have to be. I mean, that's the part I don't get. And I'm the one that wants to believe. I really do. I want to believe. And that, look, we have history, we have religious history across many different faiths that talk about manifesting bodily things. I mean, certainly in Christianity, we talk about stigmata, manifesting blood that were on the locations of the wounds that Christ had. Manifesting, in the Bible, in the Old Testament, we talk about food manifesting from the sky, which was manna, and fed the Israelites when they were on. So there's the sort of idea that these things, appear, but like nothing for a couple of thousand years. You don't hear about that in medieval times except for stigmata. And then suddenly, at the dawn of the age of spiritualism, there's like weird tissue, the vapor coming from mediums' nostrils. Like, what is that? And
I don't know.
And we make up a name for it. And now, I mean, that I have, you and I talked about this, Shiloh. Is like, and I was so happy at the first one because they were talking to experts, they were talking to skeptics. And then the 2 episodes back to back about the mediums, I was kind of pissed off because they looked silly. Like, let's find a way. I want you to look respectable. I want to know about this phenomenon even if we can't quantify it, I want to be more respectful to it than you sitting in a black room with a red light and no cameras, you know?
And on our theme, didn't it feel a little cultish when like she has her people that are in the room that help guide the seance piece of it, and then like they all have to get the vibration, and there's the singing and the music, and then when the spirit supposedly comes through and speaks to her, you know, they're just like, oh hi, so and so. I don't know, it was just one that felt very theatrical, but
yeah, I went to,
I don't know.
I've been to
I wanted to hear about your mediums, your experiences.
Well, I have only, like, I feel like I've been to a handful of truly legit psychics, like have told me names, dates, places. And this was way before the internet. I mean, I've seen a couple since, but like before the internet, they knew nothing about me going in and like came up with amazing information. But as far as mediums, I went to a trance channeling session one time with a guy who, like, his spirit guide was a Native American woman named Windsong, and I was like, wait, Windsong is a 1970s perfume by Prince Machiavelli. I remember the commercials, and I was really creeped out by the whole thing. And then I went to James Von Prague, and James Von Prague was like, I went to a big audiencing of him, and it was clear he was cold reading. It was very clear,
right? Like the John Edwards stuff we talked about. Yeah.
And then I remember talking to another medium who I've never had a reading from, but she's very famous in Los Angeles. And they really do not like James Von Prague at all. They were like, spirit's not happy with him, which I thought was like, damn, I don't think it's hard enough dealing with the material world. I don't want a bunch of spirits after me, you know?
So like he has a gift, but he's exploiting it and, you know, maybe duping people and things like that, or
that was sort of the way I heard it.
Yeah, very interesting. Anyone have any stories with mediums? Jump on as we're chatting here.
Please do jump in. And my one experience, which I think we talked about in the episode this week, was doing a psych eval on a severely mentally ill man while I was working in prison. And he was very verbally high functioning, but clearly, even with a lot of medication in him, was responding to what we call internal stimuli, which is auditory or visual hallucinations. I mean, they were really impacting this guy's quality of life. And in the middle of my evaluation on the first day I met him, he's looking at me, and then he kind of looks up over my shoulder and he says, there's an old man here. He's about 80. He's wearing wire rimmed glasses and a flannel shirt. He's not shaven. This is your dad. He's got a leather hat on with a big hole in the front, like a kind of like a farmer's hat. I mean, it's just describing my deceased father to a T. It was wacky. Like, and then of course I wasn't gonna, I mean, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to cross the boundaries. I was there for a professional reason. So of course went, well, that's very interesting, Mr. So-and-so, but let's, can we get back? I have some questions on you guys.
I honestly, good for you, because I don't know what I would have done if it was something that spot on. I would have been like,
I was shaken up.
I might need a moment, and I'm going to come back and see you tomorrow. No. That's it, especially with, you know, whatever his mental illness was. And you have to be, you know, this isn't someone that's, I don't know, just a cold reading like that in that sort of scenario. You must have had so many things flying through your head of, okay, people trying to know you in prison all the time, and is he trying to get under your skin, and is this mental illness or a combination of both, or is it real? And
well, I also thought, like, let me tell you, my dad passed away many years ago, and he was known for embarrassing the crap out of us and showing up at completely totally on for him. Like,
totally. That's freaking hilarious. Oh my goodness. So the episode after that is called Signs from the Dead. let's see, there's signs from the dead, and then there's like seeing dead people. So I think the seeing dead people one was more ghost-like. I'm sure more people have stories about that. But this is actually where I do have a couple of stories, and it's more dream based for me, for two people that I was relatively close to when they have visited me. It has been in dreams, and very powerful. And one was sort of premonition eerie. So I'll save that one for a second. But the one that really probably meant the most to me was in high school. I had a pretty close friend. We weren't tight for years or anything like that, but I kind of became a confidant of his, and we had a connection through like football and cheerleading, and he lived near me, and so sometimes we would like hang out, but nothing romantic, but just a sweet guy. And he took his own life in a very tragic situation in high school, in which there was a domestic violence incident. There was a standoff with the cops, and he ended up taking his own life, which, as the first person that I really knew to die, and for it to be that type of tragic death of somebody my age and in such a violent way, you know, obviously it led to some what we would call complicated grief. But, you know, I think that when you're in high school and your friends are your everything, we all were able to do that complicated grief process together. So I think that was a saving grace about it. But I would say maybe a good month before his death, everybody was at a high school party, and another guy and my boyfriend got in a fight, like in the street in front of the house. People all gathered around, and my friend that had died, he was there, and he was friends with the guy that was fighting my boyfriend. So he was kind of like egging his friend on, like cheering for him. And I was pissed. And I actually, you know, afterwards was really upset with him and held a grudge, and we didn't ever speak again, because then he ended up taking his life. So I think that even added to my grief and the process with that. But I ended up, probably a few months after his death, having a dream. We were sitting in a theater in chairs next to each other. This man or boy, no matter how hot it was, he always wore his Letterman jacket. Like, he was that kid. And I was sitting next to him, and I just put my head on his shoulder, and I could feel, you know how like the Letterman jackets, like the patches have that very thick looped thread. Like, yeah. I could feel the thread. And he just put his arm around me. Nothing was said. And it was like, our grudge is gone. And it was totally different after that, which was super powerful. And then I had a very close friend that when you and I, she was my best friend. We were 10 years apart. She was 10 years older than me. She was a dispatcher at my police department. And when you and I were in internship, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, stage 4. And died within 2 years. Super tragic. She had 3 little ones under the age of 10. She was the age that I am now. But she visits me in dreams about once every other year, I would say. And one year we were at like a little bistro table somewhere, and she goes, you know, Michael has diabetes. Michael is her son. He's an adult now. And I was like, okay. And that's all I remember for the dream. So I end up messaging Michael, and I was like, hey, had another dream about your mom. Like, just wanted to let you know. And she said you have diabetes. And he goes, that's insane. I'm in the process of getting tested for it right now. And he's a young man in his 20s.
That's crazy.
That was probably 4 years ago. That whole interaction. And he lives out of state. He's in the military, and has a family of his own. And yeah, I just always kind of text him whenever his mom visits me, and him and her daughters now are older. So we do that with them too. But yeah, so I don't know what it is. But those have been my little signs from the dead experiences. Nothing manifesting in front of my face.
I love that. There's a lot sort of that are super into this world, and I read a lot about paranormal, supernatural. I'm very well self-educated about different aspects of the occult. I just find it all very fascinating. And one of the things that's, and I say this kindly, but like the airy fairy, feel goods about the afterlife say,
right.
Look for feathers. A feather is on the ground in front of you as a message, or a yellow butterfly. It's always these things that are very ephemeral. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, now you've just given me, you created in me a cognitive bias.
Right.
Anytime I see anything like that, immediately, because I want to be in touch with my brother and my sister and my mother. And so now every time I look at it, I'm like, oh, maybe that's mom, which is kind of cool. But at the same time, it's like, well, I would like to on my own with some kind of connection rather than,
right.
Every time you see water, it means your father is saying hello. What?
Well, and in this episode, there's two sisters, they're elderly themselves, but their mom told them, they were like, send us a sign when she was getting ready to die. And she said, okay, I'll send you a red cardinal, the bird. And they live somewhere where cardinals are not native. And there are, now that I'm thinking about it, I can't remember if there are cameras there or if this was home video, probably home video, but a cardinal runs into their window and they're there and they're holding it. And like, they try to like, let it go free. And then it just like jumps on one of their shoulders and they're like, it's mom. And it's very sweet. And like, they had this sweet little moment and then the bird finally did fly away. But that was pretty damn specific, Oh,
yeah. Like in sort of an overarching theme of what we talk about today is, there are some, like we say in the episode this week, there are scientists out there that are trained as scientists and are still legit scientists, but they're interested in pushing the boundaries of understanding human behavior in a larger context. And one of them who is pretty much maligned a lot by the scientific community is a man named Rupert Sheldrake. And he is a fascinating guy. He's on like George Noory. He used to be on
Coast to Coast.
And he's written a lot of books. He's in Mysterious Universe, the two Aussie guys that have a great podcast that I love. But Rupert Sheldrake wrote a fantastic book called Dogs That Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home. And he proposes, he did a double-blind study about animals being able to sense change in intent from literally like 100 miles. I mean, it's fascinating stuff and written in a very like readable layman's term thing. And he proposes the idea that energy is this morphogenic field, that there is a part of us that is communicating on so many levels that we have no comprehension of. And like, we even know that animals like cats see a band of the visual spectrum that we don't see. Mm-hmm. Dogs see, and dogs' smell can be 5,000 to 15,000 times more sensitive than humans. So it's just, maybe it's something that, like we say in the episode, we don't have the ability to measure yet.
It's the sixth sense, right?
Yeah. What does she say? I have a fifth sense.
Oh, God. Abby says that her brother shows up all the time for her. And Tracy says the only time I felt like someone trying to contact me from beyond was my brother a few months after he died. He was a long-term alcoholic with obnoxious mental illness. He burned every bridge I ever crossed and mentally told him to go away and not to bother me. Yeah, Scott, you said that, with your brother, your sister, and your mom, that, when people have told you what to look for, have you wanted those signs as someone who's lost people incredibly close to you? And what does that mean to you? I did have an experience. I'm still working on mom. There's also this saying in the spiritual community that people who die with dementia much longer
to come back and communicate with their loved ones. I don't know what that means, but that's sort of the excuse I give myself for not having heard from her. My sister only recently passed away, but my brother, when he passed away, it was about 2 weeks later, and I felt him touch I was doing laundry, and I literally felt a hand on my shoulder. I was overwhelmed with this incredible sense of warmth, and I just knew it. I just knew it was him.
Yeah.
And who is this?
Oh my gosh, a skeleton.
I love it.
Hey, Abby. She said she was going to jump on. Hi, Mason.
Can you guys hear me? Or is it too loud?
No,
we can hear you. Yeah. Yep.
Yes.
Your video is frozen, but we can hear you. Maybe. Maybe not. No, we're losing you. Jump back on if you can with a better... Oh, you're back.
Just like running through the house.
I know. She's like, give me Wi-Fi.
Okay, can you hear me better?
Where's the party?
Yes.
We're going to come join after this.
In Monrovia?
Oh, man. You're like 20 minutes from me.
Oh, man. This looks better. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
Oh, hi.
Been a while.
Hi. You were going to share with us.
Yes. So my older brother, he passed away my senior year. And look at that. And I guess the most recent one, other than the blanket that I shared in the chat. On my birthday, I would always buy red and yellow tulips for his grave. And straight year of searching, I finally found a thing of red and yellow, which are my favorite flowers.
Aww. Tattooed. Aww.
Look at this.
Oh, how
Kinda cool.
sweet.
On my birthday of all days.
So on your birthday, you would take tulips to him?
Just red and yellow tulips because he was a Chiefs fan, a Kansas City Chiefs fan. I would always just get colors, but after I couldn't find them anywhere. And then on my birthday, this last year, and then again, I saw when I had been evicted. Also happened like for my birthday, and then I see yellow a lot, and then like I said, the blanket I got. It's just like he just keeps popping up, and it's just kind of a signal to keep going.
Yeah, are they the tulips where the one flower is both of the colors? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. So like,
oh, beautiful.
Orange, red.
Yes.
Like yellow tulips are my favorite flowers. So.
Oh, how sweet! I love that. I love that it's a flower too. I mean, and it sounds like he's popping up at times where you need that, extra support, inspiration.
Yeah, especially a lot. Because like where his grave was about. My alarm went off for your guys to get vocal.
Oh.
All right. Well, I just wanted to share that.
Got it. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Great to see you. I wanted to go to reincarnation quickly because then I feel like most people will have ghost stories and we can stick on a little bit if we can. But so the final episode of Surviving Death is about reincarnation. They do talk about how, because I was like, why is it always kids? But they do explore that phenomenon. And once kids are actually building their own memories, that it tends to dissipate, which was so interesting to watch because with a lot of these families, like the parents still have this very real lived experience of their kid having these memories and these experiences of this past life. And then they kind of get over it, like they're done with it. And the parents are kind of stuck with like, But yeah,
Well, it's
this thing
probably
happened.
terrifying to their parents, you know?
Absolutely.
Abs-
Absolutely. Yeah.
and the kids, like, I mean, we talk about like memories that fade, and you like, oh yeah, I used to play that game.
Right.
You know, that's for a kid, like you were saying, as the other memories start to have more weight in their consciousness, then of course the other things are gonna become weaker and, you know, recede more.
Yeah. But I do tell about your family member story.
So I have a family member that when they were very young, probably I guess around 3. I just always mess up the ages of kids. So just verbal and able to, you know, put together sentences. So 4, maybe
Maybe
a
younger
little
than
bit.
that.
Okay. So they were sitting on my other relative's lap. So it's a mom and child. And we have a lot of like pretty progressive and expansive spiritual beliefs in my family, just because like we ask a lot of questions, but you know, there's not really anybody that's very, very dogmatic. So this was back when Disney movies were on video cassette and Pocahontas had come out on VHS. So they're watching Pocahontas. And if anybody of you haven't watched it, if you haven't watched it recently, there's some actually really scary scenes. There's a scene where the Pilgrims and the Native Americans are fighting. Whole new context of that today, like the realization where we're actually looking at that stuff, though, instead of burying it like we used to. And there's like drums and loud singing, and there's fire on the screen, and the child starts to get you know, really agitated and says to the mother, Indians are bad. Are Indians bad? And she says, oh, no, the Indians are not bad. Indians are not bad. They're very angry because their land is being taken away and they're not being treated very nicely. And so everyone's starting to fight. And she wanted to kind of change the subject. So she says to her child, you know, maybe one time before you were a little kid, maybe you were an Indian. And said that the child stiffened on her lap, looked up at the ceiling, blank face, and said, no, I was never an Indian. I was your father for a while, but now I'm a kid again.
Oh,
and then just like sort of
shit.
snapped out of it and like watching the movie again. And my relative was like sitting there shaking, vibrating with that experience because her father had died when she was a teenager. So I mean, kids can be very creative. I mean, kids can really be way more creative than we give them credit for. But that's just a fascinating story, you know,
that the episode covers 2 pretty well-known ones that I have known about through the years. The boy that thought he was the pilot and was shot down in the Battle of Iwo Jima. And then the boy that thought he was the Hollywood actor, the, you know, kind of a background guy, but very big on, you know, in the stage world. And then Hollywood in the, I don't know, 20s, maybe 30s, maybe. And it's interesting because they visit both of those kids now as they're adults. And the researcher who out of University of Virginia who does this work and studies reincarnation keeps in contact with, you know, these kids that he's been studying for years and talks about how the memories have faded and the different struggles with the families and all of those things. But that was a very interesting episode. I don't know what to think about that. There's just too many coincidences, and those kids are spot on really. And with the ones they're visiting now that are adults before access to a lot of this internet stuff. And the Hollywood actor, I say Hollywood actor, but he was like a background guy. He was an agent. There was really like no information on the internet on this guy back when the family started trying to investigate it. They had to really dig and go into like archives and pull the info of who he was.
Can I also say what I love about that is that it was a background actor. It was just this regular Joe.
Yeah.
instead of all these people that say, yes, I am a reincarnated Indian princess. I am the reincarnation of a magician from the King Louis's court. You know, like,
right.
I love that it's like some regular Joe.
Yeah.
I'm reincarnated. I'm a reincarnated barista from a Starbucks in Poughkeepsie.
Hey. Oh, Poughkeepsie. Okay. I loved my job at Starbucks. All right.
Yes.
And then, of course, they have an episode called Seeing Dead People. And I think it's really interesting when they talk about the history of parapsychology and how this researcher named William James, he was a psychologist, founded the American Society for Psychical Research after losing his own child. And his aim was really to prove physical manifestations within the spirit world. So, there has been a lot of research in this area. And Emily, how are you? Great to see you.
Great. So, I'll tell you when I was my mom's Aunt Bernie.
Yes, let's hear about Aunt Bernie.
On chat. So, I was about 3 years old, and I walked in the kitchen, and my mom was talking to her mom, my grandma, and I go, "Do you remember when I was your Aunt Bernie?" And she looks at me weird because nobody ever talked to Aunt Bernie about Aunt Bernie. I go, "I was really mean. Is that why nobody talks about me?" And I do like this complete about face, like military about face, and just walk out of the room. And my mom, and I can still hear, because in my house, you could just hear everything. And my mom was like, "Mom, did you hear that?" She goes, "Yeah." And if any of your kids would have been Aunt Bernie, it's Emily.
No way.
Mouthy.
So what have you learned about Aunt Bernie now?
Nothing. So no one had seen her for decades before she died. My mom's the oldest. Her youngest two sisters never even had really heard of her, because she really was awful. She was just this mean recluse who just kind of took herself away from the whole family. And there's nothing about her. I can find her date of birth. I can't find her date of death.
Huh.
She's just, maybe I'm still Aunt, maybe she's still here.
Kelly says, "I aspire to be Aunt Bernie." Just to be
we have this saying in my family. My mother was this, looked like the crypt keeper. My nephew actually met her only once. And they asked what she thought of her. And my nephew goes, "Well, she kind of looks like the crypt keeper, but I guess she's better than the dead one."
Oh my gosh. Do you have your own independent memory of doing that, or?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I know that I put my hand kind of then it would have been up on the chair. The chair is in my house.
Okay.
Because it's part of what I got when my mom died. And me just kind of saying, just looking at her, and you know that thing you do when you're a little kid and you kind of stand there and wait till you get your mom's attention?
Yep.
And just waiting. And she looked at me like, "Come on." I'm like, "Do you remember when I was your Aunt Bernie?" And she didn't say anything. She's like, what? I think she sputtered probably. And I go, "Yeah."
Sure.
I go, I was really mean. Is that why nobody talks about me? Wow. But how would I have known that no one talked about me if I didn't know?
Right.
How do you know what
I existed? So, yeah. Yep, that's my story.
Also, that's a pretty complex concept to put together as a kid too. A contingency of if then on top of this really sort of fantastical thing. So I love stories like that. That's so fascinating.
I think you pick up a lot when you're the baby of a big family.
Yeah.
As they're developing, you get to do some extra developing along with them.
Yeah. So you learn from their mistakes a lot of times too.
And they're all way older than me. They're 12, 11, 10, and 5.
Yeah, and you're just sitting there sort of observing and soaking everything in, because older life is happening around you.
Yes.
Wow. So cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Any ghost stories? Okay.
Anyone with ghost stories or paranormal? Let's just do a catch-all paranormal thing. Dad, if you're still around.
I'm on.
Right on cue. Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Let's hear it. We're doing great.
Good. My story goes back many, many years ago. It was when I was stationed in Vietnam, and I was part of a helicopter unit, and we were down in a base called Tan Son Nhut in Saigon, and we had to supply security for our own helicopter. So I was pulling guard duty around our helicopter one night. It was monsoon. It was raining just really hard. And we went under rocket attack. And that took about maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then it stopped. And at the time, the World Series were playing here in the United States. And I had a little portable radio, and little sandbag bunker next to the helicopter. And so I just continued listening to the World Series game. And all of a sudden I turned to my right, and this is pitch black. It's pouring like just pouring, and standing right next to me out of nowhere, this tall man in a white robe, kind of Arabic. He had like a turban on. His face was visible. He had a beard, and he was with a dark black beard. And he just, I just was terrified. I was frozen. And he said in very clear accent, but I could understand him clearly. He said, "You must be aware of what's around you if you want to survive." And he disappeared.
What?
And that was
what kind of accent? Do you remember?
It was. I don't know. I want to say that if he were to speak in another language, he would probably speak in Arabic.
So something Middle Eastern, perhaps,
Middle
but
Okay.
definitely not Vietnamese. You weren't expecting,
he was out of this world.
Yeah.
No. And he was in a total restricted area with the guards outside of the perimeter that I was within. And
Whoa.
he just appeared out of nowhere. It was raining, and I just turned to my right, and he was standing there, and everything about him was white except for his brown skin and his beard. And that's all he said to me.
Was that the same rocket attack? Wasn't there an attack where where your bed where you should have been got hit?
Oh, that was when I first got to Vietnam. I was there about a month, and we flew out on a couple of missions. And I had just bought this brand new double reel Akai M8 recorder, so I could record all my own music and stuff, and was sitting right next to my bed. And we flew out, and the base that I was at the time went under rocket attack. And when we flew back in, it was my area that took a direct hit, and there was nothing of my Akai M8 recorder bigger than a dime. It just blew apart. The rocket actually hit the roof over my bed.
Wow.
But close calls like that in a zone like that happened every day.
I'm sure. Wow, that's interesting. You've never told me that. That's just this otherworldly person. My goodness.
It was definitely, I was distracted. I was listening to a World Series game. We just had back, and I was so used to it. That
who won? Who was in the World Series?
I got to get back to the game. It was I believe it was Detroit, and somebody else was playing at the time. It was 1968.
Well, we do have a Dodger game to watch tonight. That's for sure. Everybody on here better be rooting for the Dodgers. Jason, you still here? Thanks, Dad. That's awesome.
Story, and you guys have a great show, and thanks a lot for letting me.
Thanks. Yeah, of course. Thank you. I would love to hear any more creepy, kooky, paranormal, ghost, easy bake coven stories anyone has. We will hang out for a little bit. Come on, it's fun. It's almost Halloween. Scott, what are you doing for actual Halloween?
We may be coming over to your house, right?
Yay! Yes, please do. It's a Sunday night.
Yeah, I always, one of the things I like to do is I do like to think of this month, regardless of whether I'm actually getting fall weather, is to think of
Yeah.
this, in Celtic traditions and a lot of European traditions, this is the end of the harvest season, and it's when you prepare for the death of the old year and the birth of the new year. And so it has been very traditional in being a time to respect the dead, respect your ancestors, and pay homage to your relationship with them. So I try and be a little more mindful and introspective around this time, especially I've lost some very, very dear people to me over the last couple of years. So I really want to make the best of it.
Yeah, I hear ya. I think Rebecca's trying to jump on, but she said she couldn't. My dad's back.
I have a real quick question for both of you. Is there really something to the science of what numbers mean? Like, it's the
You
same.
mean like numerology?
Yeah, because like a number always shows up in my life, I guess, for the last 10 or 15 years, and it's 1111.
It's a common one for people,
1111 is
though.
a good combination.
And now
I'm sorry to say that I know that, but yeah, it is a common one.
Good. I like to be in the common area.
I'll send you. I have an article about that. Yeah.
My dad doesn't like to be an outlier. He likes to be right in the middle of the bell curve.
Right.
I hear you. Blending is good. Rebecca, I told her to jump, like maybe go out and come back in. There she is. I was going to say, just walk next door and I'll hand you my headphones.
Can you hear me?
Dun, dun, dun. The suspense. Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
There's beautiful lighting in her basement, in her torture basement.
I know.
It's where she's locked me up. I'm really not complaining. I'll
You have
stay here
a
as long
story
as she'll
for
have me.
us?
Yeah, I do. It's a crazy one. It's really, really crazy, and I hesitated sharing it, but I'm going to tell you guys. This is around 8 years ago, which I had to figure out through like which apartment we lived in. But my husband was out of town. He was actually in Israel filming a documentary, and I was home alone with all 3 kids.
Okay, already spooky.
Terrifying.
Terrifying. Yeah, I know. This is more of a horror story. And
a phone call came in, and you were like, sorry.
No, it's okay. It was just me and the kids, like by myself. And they were a lot younger at the time, obviously 8 years ago. So one night I fell asleep on the sofa, like watching TV late. And I woke up and I knew immediately that someone was in our apartment. I felt that someone had gotten in and was looking at me. And I opened my eyes. I'm like kind of getting my bearings, and there were some lights on because I'd fallen asleep on the sofa. So it wasn't, have you checked the children? Seriously. So I look, and there is a green, hazy figure, like Scooby-Doo style villain. I don't know everybody in this Get Vocal. Like, I am not someone who sees people and ghosts, like, and I'm also not, it sounds crazy to say, but this isn't the crazy part. So I'm having this like I'm having a frozen reaction, like flight or fight or freeze. I'm frozen. I'm terrified. And it's moving, and I see it like moving through my apartment. And I'm just like breathing, and I'm praying, and I'm like, my Christian upbringing's coming out. I'm like rejecting things. I'm like,
yes,
I rebuke you.
And yes. And I'm like, I do need to check the children, right? So I like stand up and I start moving through, and it like disappears. Like I didn't sense it leave. Obviously the door didn't open or shut like physically, but like it's not there anymore. Okay, so hold that thought. I am shaking. I am so scared. Kids are fine. I don't think I go back to sleep, but the next day I'm like, I don't want to worry my husband. He's going to think his wife's gone insane staying home with the kids by herself. But I was so shaken up by it that I wanted to tell him when we talked. So we end up talking the next day. Now there's several hours ahead, right? So I don't remember what the time difference is in Israel. It's probably like 6 or 8 hours or something. And so we find a time the next day to talk. And I'm like, I have to tell you something, and it's weird and scary, and I just need you to believe me. And it sounds crazy. And he's like, okay. He's like, I actually have to tell you something too, like same rules. And he's like, I wasn't going to tell you because I don't want you to worry. But now that you have something, I have something. So then I'm like, oh my God, okay. So I tell him, and then he's like, well, what time was it? And I tell him what time it was approximately. Like, I wasn't sure, but I said it had to be like after 1 a.m., but before the morning, like, I don't know. And he's like, okay. So he was in Israel making this film, but he had this guided tour, and they were in the West Bank, and it was this area occupied by the Hamas, which is like, do you know what the Hamas is?
Yeah.
Yeah. Their color is green, like a vivid green. And they had the armbands on and these uniforms, and they got into like a little bit of a dicey situation where the Israeli people that were taking my husband and the crew around were like, we should probably go. Like, this isn't the safest, but they were like kind of pushing the envelope a little bit where they were. And there was like some heightened, just tense moment. At the same time I was having that experience, this is where my husband was, in the West Bank, like surrounded by the Hamas.
Oof.
Right?
Oh.
Like, I don't know if this is a vision, a supernatural, paranormal.
Right.
I don't know what it is.
Well, the name for it would probably be you like had an intense like psychic connection with your husband, experiencing the fear that he was feeling with the most predominant thing he was visually perceiving, which was that green.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I think that it would be explained. Is like he was broadcasting on whatever channel you guys share, and that's what you got was the emotion and one, blip of color.
And a sense of like a fear for your safety.
Yeah.
Your brain made sense of it, of like, okay, I'm home alone with the kids and my husband isn't here.
Right.
So what do we all
Right.
picture? An intruder sort of thing.
Yeah.
So this goes along with what I was talking about earlier with Rupert Sheldrake talking about these morphogenic fields, that this possible could just think of it, it's communication on a different level.
Yeah, I believe
there is
in that.
there is no
totally.
supernatural because nothing supersedes nature. It's just something that we don't understand yet.
Yeah,
Wow,
that is
deep.
Dun.
So that's my story, and I was like nervous to share it because I feel, I don't know, it's so weird, but that happened.
I love it. Thank you.
That's what these things are. I mean,
They're so weird.
so spooky, so unexplained, doesn't fit neatly into like a category either.
Right.
But,
Challenging.
wow.
Yeah, it's a weird one. Okay, with that.
Okay, so what was his story? No, I'm just kidding. His story was the situation.
His story
right?
was, he wanted to tell me that like they really weren't supposed to be there. I don't really remember how it happened, but they were like, oh, it seems okay, and things there can just change on like a dime, and like something happened to where the people they were with were like, we got to go now.
That's
like
tense.
They sensed things going on that were not good, and he was like, I'm not going to tell my wife about this. Then I was like, so this green guy came in, and he's like, funny story.
Interesting.
Hold, please.
Yeah. Thanks, Bex.
Yeah, of course. Bye.
Cool. Bye.
See you soon.
Okay. Anyone else? Last call. Abby said that she had a panic attack when the Route 91 shooting was happening in Las Vegas. Gosh, that was tough. My brother was in Vegas that weekend. But not there. But I know lots of people who were. Oh, all right.
You guys, this has been
last
great.
call, guys. Yeah, thank you. Super fun. I hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll get back to some, serious real life spookiness in the next few episodes. So thanks. This was fun. We haven't done this in over a month. It was good to see everyone. Have a great, safe Halloween. Do all the fall stuff that you can, because then, Christmas is going to be shoved down our throats in like a matter of days. But take care. Thanks, Scott, for making it from beautiful Palm Springs.
Yes.
And
Love you guys.
I will see you tomorrow, Scott.
Yes. And we will do maybe a little bit of live streaming on Facebook from there.
Let's do that.
Everybody. So
okay.
Everybody have a great evening.
Yep. Take care.